If you only have this much stress, you're fine. But if more and more and more stress gets poured in, it's eventually going to spill. And as that stress spills over, we start to experience something called self-regulation depletion. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I am looking forward to talking to you about a topic that I am very passionate talking about, which is stress and how it impacts our relationships. And so tonight we are going to get started by grounding ourselves first because we want to get our nervous systems into a space where we're feeling more connected with our bodies. Before we start talking about stress, I'm sure that many of you, if you're like me and you're on the East Coast, it might be later in the evening. If you're on the West Coast, it might be just the end of your work day. And so you might need a moment just to unwind. So, what I want you to start with is to take a deep breath in through your nose and just bring that all the way into your belly. Holding it there for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then slowly exhaling. Inhale through your nose. 5, 4, 3. Keep going until you fill your belly all the way up. Holding it there, and then slowly exhale. Allowing all of that air and all of the tension from your day to come out through that exhale. Let's do it one more time. Inhale in all the way to your belly, holding it there, feeling the tension as you hold that air in your belly, and then allowing yourself to relax by exhaling, letting all that air out. Okay, great. So you can slowly come back and we're going to get started. So again, thank you for being here. My name is Liz Earnshaw, and I'm the author of Till Stress Do Us Part, which just came out last Tuesday, actually, so it's almost been exactly a week. And in my book, I talk about the impacts of stress on our relationships and how when we're navigating a lot of stress, we tend to fight more. We tend to have, less gracious opinions of other people, and a lot of different things are happening in our minds and our bodies. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is called the system. And this is a system to help people kind of figure out what kind of stress are we facing and how can we navigate it together. But before we dive into that system, there's a few things I want to go over with you. And I do have some slides just so that you can kind of uh, stay along with me. And we're going to talk now about how stress influences our relationships. And so we're going to talk here about internal and external stressors. There are two types of stressors that we experience in a relationship. And so external stressors are the stressors that are outside of the relationship. They're not caused by the relationship. They are stressors that are caused by the economy, that are caused by traffic on the road, that are caused because our boss said something concerning to us at the end of the workday. Those stressors happen outside of the relationship, but they can have an impact on inside of the relationship, right? So if you imagine a relationship, imagine it's kind of surrounded by a bubble and there's all this stress happening outside of the bubble and it gets too big and it starts kind of impeding on the bubble and maybe almost popping the bubble. There's also internal stress. So this is the stress that is inside of that bubble. And so you're thinking about the things that are happening in your home with your partner. And these might be things like disagreements around childcare, disagreements around how money should be spent, concerns about what's happening with intimacy. Maybe you're noticing that you're trying to be affectionate with your partner and they seem withdrawn. And so you're feeling stressed You're feeling tension because of what's happening between you and your partner inside of that bubble. And sometimes that tension can get really big and it can make the bubble pop too. And so we're constantly dealing with internal and external stressors in our lives. It is not something that's ever going to go away. And sometimes these things can be positive and sometimes they can be negative. For example, a positive stressor can be buying a new home. When you buy a new home, you are maybe really excited about that. It's a good thing. You've saved up money for it. And if you've ever moved, you know it's incredibly stressful. So they can be positive and they can also be negative. When these stressors become really big, either individually or between us and another person, what starts to happen is we have something called stress spillover. And what that means is exactly what it sounds like, which is there's so much stress that it starts to spill out. It's kind of like if you imagine this cup, it gets filled with more and more and more. If you only have this much stress, you're fine. But if more and more and more stress gets poured in, it's eventually going to spill. And as that stress spills over, we start to experience something called self-regulation depletion. Self-regulation depletion is when we have run out of our ability to self-regulate. And so all of those skills that we know how to utilize, we know that if we breathe, it's going to help us. We know that if we talk with a calm voice, it's going to help us. We know if we take a break, it's going to help us. We've become completely depleted and we can't think about those things anymore. And then that stress spills over and we start to behave in ways that maybe we don't recognize, that don't align with our values. And so what then starts to happen is our mind and our body becomes impacted by the stress in a way that influences our relationships. So we can move to the next slide now. And these changes to the mind and the body, they cause difficulties in relational behavior. So the body starts to make our heart race. I actually hook people up to pulse oximeters that helps me to see and also helps a person to see that they're really stressed because our heart rates will go to 100 beats per minute or more. We start to have dry mouth. We start to need to urinate more. All sorts of things are happening to our bodies because we're being primed to protect ourselves. And at the same time, things are happening to our brains that are priming us to protect ourselves as well. So we become hyper-focused, which means that we're not very good at seeing the big picture. When we're hyper-focused, we can't do things like be curious or hear other people's point of views. We lose our sense of humor because we have to be really serious if we're in distress, right? We need to make sure that we're safe. In relationships, we might not be being chased by the lion, but we might feel existential threat. So maybe we feel like our partner's never going to be on the same page as us with finances, and that causes us a lot of distress. So all of these things are happening in our body and our mind, and it starts to cause conflict in relationships. I work with lots of couples. They come in and I ask them, what's going on between the two of you? Why are you here today? And they will have lots of reasons. They'll say, we argue so much, we're not having sex anymore. My partner is withdrawn, or my partner is nagging me all the time, or whatever it is. And what I have noticed, especially in the last 4 years, is that so much of that stuff that they're describing is a symptom of what's really going on, which is stress. They have gotten to the point that the internal and external stressors are too much. They have self-regulation depletion, which means that they're doing things like yelling at each other, not showing each other grace, being withdrawn, and doing all of these self-protective types of responses to stress. And so what I actually want to work on them with is figuring out, where is all of this stress in your life, and which of the stressors can we do something about, and which of the stressors can we do nothing about? And that's where the system comes in. And so in my book, I give a lot of tips about what you can do about stress and how you can navigate it with another person so that it does not negatively impact your relationship, and so that you can bring your relationship to a place where it's not you and your partner becoming enemies because of the stress, but instead your enemy is the stress. And so you're working together against that.